Good afternoon, everyone, and happy Wednesday. My name is Michelle Brown, and I'm the Vice President of the Policy and External Initiative Department here at the Council for Professional Recognition. We are so grateful you're here with us this afternoon, and even more grateful that you chose to spend time with us today to have this important conversation about the high school CDA. We have a brand new topic and webinar for you, which is designing a high school CDA CT curriculum. And you're going to hear more about this shortly. So get comfortable and get your note-taking materials ready because you're about to hear some awesome information from our high school CTE expert. I also need to let you know that we're saving space at the end of the webinar for a question and answer session. So please don't disconnect too early. Okay, y'all, I feel like I need a drum roll moment. I have one very cool honor today, and I have to tell you guys, I'm so excited to be able to share with you that Dr. Moore was able to join us today because he may not want me to tell you this, but he was kind enough to come off vacation to do so. So thank you, Dr. Moore. We are going to kick off our time together with him. And as you guys probably know already, he is the CEO of the council, who many of the staff affectionately refer to him as boss. So Dr. Moore, I'm turning the virtual floor over to you.
Thank you, Michelle, and hello, everybody. I'm not going to be with you very long on this part of the program because I think you have such an important webinar ahead of you. I'm so excited to be joining you for this third high school CDA webinar, and I'm looking forward to what our expert has to share with you today, Dr. Bisa Batten-Lewis. But let us remember that our nation is still recovering from a major pandemic, and we must help all of our students get ready to serve and be able to share in meeting tomorrow's needs. Investments in career technical education programs are proven to serve students and prepare them for in-demand employment opportunities that matter really greatly in this recovery effort. And we at the council know that the ECE sector is one of those in-demand industries and that it's in desperate need of high-quality practitioners to serve children and families across our nation. High school CDA students are such a critical piece of rebuilding the ECE employment pipeline. So we have a real opportunity in front of us to recover and rebuild a high-quality workforce. And we at the council feel really strongly that high school students are part of that rebuilding effort. So thank you again, and welcome to the program today. Now I'm going to sit back, relax, and listen to what my staff and the great Dr. Bisa have in store for us today. Enjoy.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sandy Kowalczyk, Manager, Growth and Business Development, and welcome to this webinar. I'm so happy to be here with you today. And I did see early on some questions you had. I'm going to just answer this right away. Yes, this PowerPoint and the recording will be available after the presentation, a little after. You'll get that from us. So welcome again. And next slide. Today, the Council's Training and Technical Assistance Program supports the high school CTE community in building the ECE workforce with the implementation of high-quality program content and design through the provision of training and technical assistance services. And in today's session, we're going to examine a few things. We're going to look at requirements for earning the Child Development Associate credential in high school. We're going to explore recommendations for designing an industry-based high school CDA curriculum, inclusive of 120 hours of child development education and 480 hours of work experience with children. And lastly, one of my favorites, which I think everyone is looking for information on, is discovering opportunities to support high school CTE students and collecting resources for the CDA professional portfolio. And I am very happy to introduce today our main speaker, Dr. Biza Batten-Lewis. She is the founder and managing partner of Wings Curriculum. She's a best-selling author, an experienced education authority, and a renowned public speaker, and has been conducting CDA trainings since 2003. And she essentially, consults with school systems around the country to guide CTE leaders and ECE instructors on how to implement the CDA in high school CTE programs. And she's been working with us for quite a while and is an esteemed colleague in that regard as well. I'm not going to go into more of her background, as you can see on there, so we can get on with the webinar, but I'm very happy to introduce Dr. Biza.
Thank you, Sandy, and greetings, CDA community, wherever you are around the country and around the world. Welcome to this webinar. I am excited today about answering your questions, many questions that have come in about CTE curriculum. So let's get rolling. Next slide. Yes. So want to make sure we remind you what the CDA credential is and how important it is. So it's the most widely recognized credential in early care and education, not only in America, but even in Ghana. It's in China. It's in Egypt. The CDA is in a number of countries and continents. So it is widely recognized in ECE. It's also a key stepping stone on the career path. These days, we don't like to say career pathway, we like to say career lattice. So we're starting to hear the word lattice more because you can go different directions with an early care and education credential in our field. So it's a key stepping stone. We often call it the first step. So to be awarded the CDA credential, the candidates must complete an assessment process. And y'all know in education, we love assessments, right? But this one is a practice-based assessment in addition to an online, a virtual assessment as well. So I love that you get the practice-based piece along with the test taking as well. And it's based on competencies. In education, standards are very important. They drive everything that we do in the classroom. The standards are already done for you, research-based standards that we can utilize in the classroom to support our students in completing a credential and being ready for the industry when they finish high school. When they graduate, when they earn the CDA, guess what? They can be a lead teacher in many states. We know that requirements vary around the country, around the state, different states, but for the most part, they can be a lead teacher in many states. So you really want to consider when your high school students graduate from your ECE program, can we support them in making sure they have their credential? They can do this along the way. So let's learn how. Next slide. So the process, I wanted to remind you of the process, those who may not be aware, and review it for those who have heard about the process before. So the CDA credentialing process, it is candidate driven, and it starts with preparation. So that the candidate prepares while they're actually in the high school classroom. So we know people are out in the community and colleges getting training as well. But for high schoolers, they're already in your classrooms and they're taking early childhood education. So why not go ahead and get the education and prepare for the application process while you're already learning about young children and best practices in the industry, right? May as well do it while you're doing that. So the preparation step we'll talk about today. That's the 480 hours working with young children, and working doesn't mean being paid for it. It means direct care for children. 120 hours of city education is also a part of that process, that preparation process, and getting ready for assessment with the portfolio. Once they submit their application, the council reviews their application, and once they receive an approval or ready to schedule notice, two things happen. They have an observation by a professional development specialist, a PDS, and they also take the exam, the CDA exam, at a Pearson VUE site. So those two things happen once their application has been approved, and they're just waiting for the council to make a decision on whether they are awarded a national CDA credential. So that is the process. Today, we're focusing on the first step, the preparation phase. So here are the requirements. For high school students to earn the credential, they must be a junior or senior to earn the credential, but they can start while they're a freshman. So what does that mean? You can actually start the education component when they're in your first year of early care and education. We'll talk more about that today. So the 120 hours of formal education, they earn that in your classroom. It's covering growth and development of young children. There's infant toddler setting, preschool setting they can choose from. And I'll go over the 8 areas today because they have to have 10 hours of training in each of those areas, and the other 40 hours can be in any area. So the total is 120 hours, 10 hours in each of 8 areas, and then the other 40 hours in any of those areas to equal 120. So again, I'll discuss more of that today about the CDA subject areas. They also have to complete 480 hours of work experience with young children while they're in the program within those 3 years. And again, work doesn't necessarily mean for pay, but they have to spend time working with the young children, caring for them. And so again, you can be paid or a volunteer. They also have to complete a portfolio. I'm showing you today how they can do that while they're in your early education program already. Next slide. So let's dig into the 120 hours of formal education. This is one of the main questions I get when I'm providing TA for different school systems and early educators is, how do we design this program? What are we supposed to teach them? How many years should it be? So let's dig into that. I first want to reassure you of something. In terms of the clock hours, 180 hours, if they are in your program for at least a year and a half, based on how many hours they come to you per week, you're getting the hours in. You're getting the 120 hours of formal education. The last webinar we did, actually everyone who was on said that their program was either, their early education program was 2 years or 3 years. So if your program is 2 years, they're definitely getting the hours in. And that 3rd year is likely for the practicum component, where they're working with the young children and getting those finishing up the 480 hours. So again, this slide is just to reassure you that they are definitely getting their 120 hours if your program is at least a year and a half or 2. All right, next slide. So look at the competency standards. So we talked about it being a competency-based, standards-based credential. There are 6 goals for the CDA. I'm going to spend a lot of time today on this slide and the next slide, where we're talking about the 6 goals, the standards, and the 8 subject areas. So again, this is our main focus today. So with the 6 different standards, you start with standard 1, safe, healthy learning environment. And I say start there, but it may not be your first course or your first topic in your unit, but maybe it should be. I have found that it's so much easier, especially in the 2nd year, when you design your course around the actual CDA content. But of course, the choice is yours. When you cover it, it's up to you, as long as it's covered. So safe, healthy learning environment. And for the 6 goals, there are a total of 13 functional areas. Each functional area there may be a different number of functional areas per standard. So for goal 1, there are 3 functional areas. There is safe, healthy, and learning environment. So again, on the next slide, I'll go dig into what that covers a little bit more. For goal 2, you can go back to the previous slide. Thank you. Yes. For goal 2, it's advancing physical and intellectual competence. And there are 4 functional areas there: physical, cognitive, communication, creative. So as I'm saying this, I want all my educators who are on trying to figure out their curriculum to think about something. What if each of the goals are a unit? Each goal is a unit. What if each goal is your unit? And then what if the functional areas are your subtopics within your units, your studies within your unit? I found that's a great way to cover the content and be inclusive of all the information for the CDA. So when you're mapping out your standards and what you're going to cover for your different units, maybe you should consider it that way. For each goal, your unit, and then your functional areas may be your different studies within that unit, and there's a project possibly for some of those. So for goal 2 that I was on, the physical intellectual competence, you cover physical, cognitive, communication, and creative. For goal 3, this one is on supporting social and emotional development and positive guidance. There are 3 functional areas: self, social, guidance. For goal 4, This is where we cover positive and productive relationships with families. And for the rest of those three, you see there's only one functional area. It's solely families. It's focused on families. Goal 5 is ensuring a well-run, purposeful program responsive to participants' needs. And the functional area is program management. Goal 6 is maintaining a commitment to professionalism. Professionalism is the functional area. So if you think about, how do I want to design my curriculum? Again, this may be a design that you can consider based on how long you have the students. This could be when how you implement it. I will say a lot of programs will cover the child development component in that first year. So what I often see is goal 2 and 3 for sure are often covered in year 1. Some people spend the whole year 1 on goal 2, covering physical, cognitive, communication, creative, for age group 0 to 5. So, hey, you can think about how you want to do that. All right, next slide. Oh, let me go back one more time. Sorry. So I put literacy integration in red because I wanted to make sure that I remembered to tell you. So you know how in the school systems that they're really keen on telling us we should integrate literacy into CTE programs. Now, no matter what you're teaching, ECE, automotive, culinary arts, they want to make sure that literacy is integrated as a component in your lessons. So this is a great way to do that because to earn their CDA, a part of their portfolio is they have to write a competency statement for each of the functional areas, each standard and functional area. They have to write, again, a competency statement about how they implement those areas with young children, what they do with young children. So again, this is a great way to integrate literacy because they're writing, they're reviewing, you're drafting, a great way to integrate literacy. Next slide. The 8 CDA functional subject areas. The 8 CDA subject areas. These are the areas where I mentioned early on, where they have to earn 10 hours of training, have 10 hours of training of education in each of those areas, which equals 80. And the other 40 to earn 120 hours can be in any of the areas. So you may find yourself spending more than 10 hours on some of the areas, right? But as long as there is at least 10 in all of them, the other hours can be in any of the areas to equal 120. So around the country, curriculum looks very different, but hey, let's figure out what you might be able to do today, because I know you guys are already getting ideas. So for subject area 1, this is safe, healthy learning environment. So some examples: safety, first aid, health, nutrition, space planning, materials, equipment, play. Again, those are lessons that you might embed in your program. I'm about to give you a gem. So if you are writing, taking notes, please get ready for this gem. Get ready for it. If you don't have a pen or paper, grab your phone and type it, text it, email it to yourself. Here it goes. One way I found that's a really practical way of designing your courses, especially integrating technology and having online lessons for them, is to start with an introduction. These are your 5 lessons. I have 5 lessons when I was teaching in high school, ECE. So 5 lessons per topic. The first one was introduction. It might be a video and they have a reflection, again, literacy, about that particular component or discussion. So introduction. And then I gave them 3 lessons on that topic. So let's say we're doing safety. They watched a video about safety in childcare programs, and then they did a reflection on it. I have a lesson A, a lesson B, a lesson C, where they're learning about different types of safety. It may be about crib safety, it may be about the learning environment, preventing injuries. But they have 3 different lessons. And then the final one, the 5th one, is your review/evaluation, or it can even be a project. So did you get that? You have your introduction, you have your lesson A, B, C, and then your final one can be a review and evaluation. If you take these topics in based on the time that you have the students, get 5 lessons per the topics, you can really have a robust curriculum for your ECE program. So one idea that I really love for subject area 1 is they would plan menus for nutrition, and that was simple for them because they were working with a local childcare program anyway. They were partners. And so I had them plan menus. And that was a very interesting topic because people don't know the rules that go into meal patterns. So they got to learn the meal patterns that childcare providers have to follow in our area. And some of them were even interested in working in nutrition in the industry. So that was amazing as well. For space planning, we even did sometimes, you may call them dioramas, I call them childcare center models. And some people use Play-Doh, we did it in groups, but they were actually able to build we did it by classroom. So I wanted them to know the difference in how an infant classroom should look, a toddler classroom, a preschooler classroom, and also a whole center layout. So y'all, that's a whole unit right there on space planning. And how to keep the children safe. And so that was learning environment. So again, those are just a few ideas of how to work with young children. And then lastly, I'll share for this one, I'm only giving you a few examples based on time. For materials and equipment, I even had them to come together, work in groups to develop materials list that will go in the classroom, or they could claim, I want to be a preschool teacher. So they had to come up with a material and equipment list that was safe and developmentally appropriate for that particular classroom. They loved that assignment. And one thing they learned there was that there are a lot of resources that are available that help them to do that, especially with QRIS available, quality rating systems around the country. There are a variety of lists that they can use that are already developed. And I was fine with them submitting lists that were already available as long as they were appropriate. Moving on to 2, advancing children's physical and intellectual development. Again, this may be your year 1 for the most part. It may be probably half of your year. It depends on how long you have the students again in your class. So this is when you study largest and small motor development, language and literacy, all the different subject areas, art, music, math, brain development, science, technology, even dual language learning, English language learners. So it's really important that you spend time on this one because you're probably going to have way more than 10 hours in this one because you're looking at children 0 to age 5. And we know those ages vary. What they need varies based on their age and stage. So again, child development, this is where they're learning, and it may take you a number of months, a number of lessons. So you may have an infant toddler unit or just infants alone. I remember doing caring for infants, a unit on that. And then we went into the toddler topics and then preschooler. So that was the first at least 4 months. It was Christmas before we finished preschoolers. And then based on your school and your district, January, we're into school agers. So it just depends on whether you're studying school agers or not. But for the credential, it's birth to age 5, okay? For 3 is children's social and emotional development. And this is where we discuss behavior, self-awareness, self-esteem, and culture is really important here as well. One of the favorite assignments I love to give here is for the students to bring in children's books based on any of these topics and needs. There was a book called When Dinosaurs Divorce. And so the dinosaurs divorced, not the parents. That was one of my favorite books. There's another book, Tell Me Again About the Night I Was Born. And that book is about a child who was adopted. And so they brought 2 books in. This is their assignment, 2 children's books. It could be your book from your siblings at home. It could be the library. That didn't matter. Bring 2 books in. They got into groups, they swapped books, they talked about the books, and then they wrote a reflection on the books. You guys, these are practical lessons that they will enjoy doing. Even the students who are on their phone a lot or don't want to listen, they will listen when you make it practical like this. 4, productive relationships with families. You get into family, parent involvement, family engagement. We use that term a lot now too. Home visits, conferences, referrals. I actually had them to interview their parents, you guys. So consider what might you have them do. That's a fun lesson to have them to learn the content. Go 5, subject area 5 is managing an effective program. I had them interview a center director It could be any actual administrator at the school, even a teacher, and talking about the planning, the lesson planning, the record keeping, the reporting, and they had to bring back forms from the school, lesson plan form, emergency form, incident report form. And the great thing about this, which I'll share in a few minutes, they need these anyway for their portfolio. So you're developing the portfolio along the way. So I always remind them, I don't give busy work. Everything I do is intentional. So if what you're doing is helping them lead to this credential, they will appreciate the work that you're having them to do. 8, professionalism. This is when I have, you can have them study the different early childhood professional associations. The council is so gracious on the resources link on their website. There's a link to professional associations. So I have them research them, choose 3 that they might join, and we do a discussion on it. It's the whole thing, all right? So consider how you might implement professionalism in your classroom. We also research early childhood conferences and look at which ones they might go to. They need to understand that this field is bigger than the classroom. There are careers everywhere where there are children. There are careers everywhere in this field. Observation record keeping, they do observe children. They do anecdotal records, basic observation, running records, anecdotal records. All of this, y'all, they enjoy. I even have them go home if they have a sister and brother, and it's amazing what they have to say about their siblings when they come back to school. The last one is principles of child development and learning. And so this is birth to age 5, and it's going to vary here as well. 2, 3, and 8 really go together. So you can actually, again, cover all 3 of those in year 1 of your program. All right, next slide. So I'm often asked about the books that you should use. So here are my recommendations. For year 1, whatever foundational book, and let me preface this by saying, if your program is 3 years, if your early childhood program, it takes 3 years to complete your pathway, for year 1, whatever foundational textbook you've already chosen, there are a variety of them out there. Feel free to drop yours in the chat if you'd like. I've seen Judy Hur working with young children the most. It has a lot of chapters in there. You'll never use them all, but remember, textbooks are references, all right? They're not to teach from, so they're tools for teaching, but not to teach from, so they can refer to those. So a foundational textbook about child development would be fine for year 1. Next slide. So for year 2, again, if you're a 3-year program, this is when you start digging into the CDA and you let them know, okay, this is, if you're here with me for year 2, that means you really are thinking about working in this profession. So great, let me help you with that. Some instructors will have a group of students who are earning the CDA and a group of students who are not in the same class. What I found though is once they see how much fun they're having, once they see them earning the credential at the end, they wish they would have done it, or they ask you, 6 months later. So you may want to consider having all of them do the same work, but it's up to you. I just noticed they want to do it later and they've missed out on a lot of work. Again, the choice is yours. So in year 2, you definitely need the council's materials. I'm going to repeat that. Year 2, you definitely need the council's materials. So you want to purchase the Essentials book, the Essentials for Working with Young Children textbook. I believe it's on sale right now on the website. The workbook, there's a student workbook, and there's also 2 standards guides. The yellow one is for infant toddler focus, the setting, and the green one is for preschool setting. They have to choose a setting that they want to earn their CDA in. So I'm going to say for sure, they definitely need those first 2 in year 2. You have an option based on what they're doing for their portfolio if you want to buy those second books, the standards guides for year 2. If you have them for year 3, I'm going to say you may want to consider holding off on buying everyone the book because they're going to lose them, but it's up to you. If you have them 3 years, you may want to consider buying the book in the 3rd year, the standards guide. But by year 2, they definitely need the first 2 books that are on the screen. The Working with Young Children textbook, that is your textbook actually, okay? And then you have the workbook. Next slide. So if you have a year 3, all they're doing is their portfolio and working with young children. They're doing their portfolio and they're working with young. It's a practice-based year. They've learned what they need to in terms of the textbooks and the content. Now they're implementing that in the programs to learn more about the industry. And again, they're working on their portfolio, doing their competency statements, tweaking those, finalizing those, and their final product. This can be your final project for the year. It can be your practice-based exam. They can actually have their final portfolio done at the end of year 3. All right, next slide. Thank you. So if your program is only 2 years, I recommend introducing the CDA books at the beginning of year 2 as your core curriculum, okay? So if your program is 2 years, your whole curriculum is the CDA. And that's wonderful because all the statements, the goals are there. You don't have to worry about essential questions because everything is there that you need. You just turn the standards into questions. You have all the goals and objectives for your lesson plans because the council has already done its homework. The council has done its homework. So everything is there that you need. Next slide. Next slide. So for your resource collection, get a lot of questions about the resource collection, which makes up your portfolio. I highly recommend, in red there you see projects and grades. Unfortunately, we have to have grades for our students, but it's wonderful when it can be something that they can use. It's a grade on something that they can use. That's purposeful. So the artifacts or the resources that they're collecting for their portfolio, why not make those grades? Here's some examples. First aid and CPR, they have to have a first aid and CPR card in their portfolio. This training I actually did in year 2. Our program, I was in Georgia. Our program was 3 years. So in year 2, they got first aid and CPR training. So you can talk to your healthcare specialist, your healthcare teacher, or your PE teachers. If they're unable to support you in getting them first aid, you may want to consider what I did. I found a Project SAVE by CHOA, Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, and I was able to become an instructor at no charge. And I offered them cards at no charge. So I became a first aid CPR instructor, and I was able to offer that for my class. So that's something you consider in your community. So CHOA Project SAVE, SAVE, SAVE is where I found that. So see what's available in your community. But the first aid CPR card, it's a practice-based, it's a grade. Once you see them perform CPR, I would consider that a grade, right? And you can give them a first aid exam or test. Once they pass that, they earn it as well when they earn the actual card. The weekly menu, I mentioned that earlier. Again, it's a grade. A weekly lesson plan. I eventually partnered my students and had them do a whole thematic unit together. They loved the unit. I mean, they were really great songs that were connected to their theme and their standards. They had great books to read to the children that were on the plan. So this is a time for them to collaborate to create a whole thematic unit in high school. And it was amazing. I'm letting you know they can do it. They're ripe and they're ready. They have to develop 9 learning activities anyway for their portfolio. So while they're in that unit where they're learning about the learning environment, that's a great time to have them to do those 9 activities. So that by the time they finish that unit, they already have what they need for their portfolio. So you're embedding the resource collection in your lesson plans and making these your grades. I mentioned the bibliography of children's books. They had to have a bibliography, not the actual books. But the way I had them to do that was, again, have them bring books in. They swapped them around. They were amazed at all the books that were out there for young children with deep content, but it was, child friendly, like the dinosaurs divorcing. So think about the bibliography of children's books that you can implement in your program. Family resource guide. They need to know what resources are available in the community. For instance, if a child has a disability, if a child speaks another language, if a child or a family needs counseling, they have to find those local resources. Why not make that a part of your grade in the families part of your unit, which is also a standard and a functional area. Yes. The state regulations, having them research find the state regulations on the website and learning what the state requires for to be hired in leadership positions, center director, teacher. All of this is a part of your portfolio anyway. So why not make it a project, give them a grade, and they also are getting their CDA portfolio prepared. Early childhood professional associations, you heard me mention that earlier, and then finally child abuse and neglect requirements. So this is a tough one sometimes, but they need to learn about all the different types of abuse and neglect. It's an interesting chapter for them too, and it's just really all about the way you present it and being careful watching those emotions, but making sure you talk about sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, as well as neglect. And again, these become grades. Next slide. So the work experience. They have to earn 480 hours of work experience with young children. So again, let's talk about that. I have some ideas for you here. Next slide. Remember, they have to choose between infant, toddler, or preschool. So high schoolers get two choices: birth to 36 months, infant, toddler, or 3 to 5 years preschool. And they can earn their CDA in one of the other. Again, those books, the yellow book is infant, toddler, the green book is preschool. And this is the area they will take their exam in, their CDA exam. It is also the classroom that they will be observed in, whichever setting they choose. And when they're developing their portfolio, it needs to be centered around the age groups as well. And all the information they need for their portfolio and their standards are in those two books that I show you, those yellow and green books. Everything is there. They've been perforated where you can tear out the pages and put them in your portfolio where needed. So awesome. Thank you, council. Next slide. So your recommended work experience, my recommendations for year one for traditional instruction. So if your class is face-to-face all the time, I recommend beginning your for your labs to begin your observations and case studies with young children in year one. Okay, so for traditional instruction, I'm saying that because you got to have 480 hours. And again, they can just be observations. They don't have to be working with the children. They can literally be observations and case studies. So maybe not child interaction yet because they're still in year one with you, but at least they're getting to observe and record. And again, that's a standard. Next slide. So for year two, I recommend hybrid instruction where they're in your classroom some days and you're alternating with them going to lab. Maybe 50% they're in your class and the other time they're with the children. So whether you're working with a child care center nearby, some of you all have child care centers programs in your school. In year two, they should not be in your classroom with you every single time. You definitely need to break that up where they're going to the child care program the other half of the time at least. Okay, next slide. In year three, I highly recommend you use your technology. Okay, maximize your technology, whatever online course software that you're using. I recommend you use that and have your instructional piece online. And you have labs every single class. My year three students, all they did was come in, sign in, make sure, had to take their attendance. Y'all know how it goes. Once I knew they were there, they went to do their labs with the children. And they came back to check in before class was over. Okay. And I was, I'm right there with them. I'm saying, but I have students here and then they're right here with the children. So I want to make sure that it's important that year three is not traditional instruction. They're working with the children all the time. And you have the online platform to support them in making sure that their portfolio is getting done. So you can use your online software to instruct them accordingly, offer assignments so you can have your grades also online. All right, next slide. If your program is only 2 years, I'm recommending highly you maximize your online instruction and you start alternating your labs. Your labs need to start in year one, at least with observations for that first semester, if your program is only 2 years. Okay, so to get the 480 hours, you're gonna have to start your labs the first year, but they don't have to have contact, but at least observing them and talking about what they can do with the young children. So think about that for your program. Next slide. have a resource for you. I'm getting ready to close, so get your questions ready. We're getting ready for Q&A. You see the Q&A there at the bottom of your screen. So if you have not asked a question, please type your question in the Q&A and in the question part, please, so that we can prepare to respond. So we have the high school CDA handbook, which supports you in implementing the high school CDA. And it starts with, should you even do it? All right. So you're able to assess your community and your school to find out, is this something we should do in our program? You can even get to assess your students. So that's the first part of the book, but it goes all the way into implementing. You guys, there are forms in there. There are forms for a question I get asked a lot about when they go to the child care programs. How do they sign in? There's a sign-in form in the book, right? There's a lot in there for you. Even though the book is, you can print the book, it is a digital book because it has live links in it. So a lot of you all who are on, I've heard many say, I printed the book, great. But make sure you save the online version as well, because again, we put links in there so that you can click and print and find even more resources to support you in your work. I'm going to drop a link in the chat now because our folks can share it with you. I'm sharing with you Georgia's curriculum. I love how they have it set up with EC1, the 2 different pathways that you can choose from. They can do EC1, 2, and 3, which is just traditional practically, but EC1, 2, and practicum, those 3 years, practicum means it's more practice-based. So those students are the ones who primarily earn their CDAs. Okay, so there are 2 different early childhood pathways in Georgia, and you can see the program guides and everything. So bragging on Georgia a little bit, but I like to share something that you can use there because people always ask about what different states are doing. In this book, though, you get links to a variety of things that different states are doing. You can even look at funding. How do we even fund this? How do we get funding for books? How do we implement the CDA with FCCLA? Or FFA, our CTSOs, career and technical student organizations. How do we implement the CDA with those? So you have an array of information in the handbook, and I'm hoping that you get some great use out of it. So that link is there. In addition to that, next slide, please. You will find some resources to support you in moving your program forward. Next slide, that just tells you a little bit more of what I said about the book. We also have webinars coming up. So on that same high school page, you'll see more information about resources that are offered for the high school CDA program. But this is what's coming up. The next webinar, and you'll receive an announcement soon, it will be on preparing for assessment. So we'll take a deeper dive in the portfolio because I know a lot of you are asking, well, how should it look and how should we organize it? You know, I need examples. That's what that particular webinar would be about, the portfolio itself, a deeper dive, and also the CDA exam and preparing for the CDA verification visit. That's the on-site visit by the professional development specialist. So be excited about this final webinar for this year regarding the high school CDA. So look out for your email because you'll be receiving that announcement soon. Next slide. TA is available. I'm so excited that the council is allowing me to coach you directly. You can get 30 minutes with me on Tuesdays from 4 to 6. We call them TA Tuesdays, Technical Assistance Tuesdays. So the form is on that same page, the link that's in the chat where the high school CDA handbook is, that's the high school CDA page. You can complete that form and you will get a link to schedule 30 minutes with me to ask any other questions that you may have. So join me on Tuesdays to pick my brain. It's your 30 minutes. And once you have the meeting, when you're coming to the meeting, when you schedule it, you can invite anyone who's in your community that needs to come. Sometimes I have 4 or 5 people on from one district trying to get information. So please use me while I'm here. I know we're doing it at least till the end of the year. I would love to have TA Tuesday with you. Next slide. All right, Michelle, I'm turning it over for you for questions, and we're hoping to have all the answers for them. Thank you all. Michelle, you're muted. Yep, You're good.
I apologize. I did that last time. Some of you were saying there's a technical problem. I was the technical problem. So charge it to my head, not my heart, and forgive me. But Dr. Bisa, I want to tell you thank you for the expert information that you shared, and that the chat, I shouldn't say the chat, the question and answer feature has been a buzz. And before I share some of the questions with you and the rest of our esteemed colleagues that are on the webinar, I want to say thank you to our community, because we've had a lot of peer support going on. There's some questions that you won't have to answer or that you'll repeat, because we've had peers who have experience with high school CDA answering for us. So thanks, y'all. So Dr. Bisa, are you ready to get started with the question and answer session?
Yes, let's get started.
Okay, and so Sandy, I'm gonna ask you to come on camera, and Dr. Moore, if you're still here, I'm gonna ask you to come on camera as well, just in case there's some questions for you. Okay, look, you guys, Dr. Moore may not be here, but you have us. Okay, are y'all ready? I gotta do a countdown. Okay, in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so here's the first question, ladies. Is TA available to states? And Bisa, you kind of answered this already, so I'm going to throw this at you. Is TA available to states to help us implement a statewide CTE program?
Yes, thank you, Michelle, for that question. So yes, I'll clarify the link in the chat for the high school CDA handbook. On that same page, you can complete that form, and a link will be sent to you, a calendar link to schedule time. I recommend before you schedule time that you meet with whoever you need to in your community who needs to be on, so that you can choose a date and time together and have all of them come on. I've met with, again, 4 or 5 people at the same time. Whoever your stakeholders are who need to be there, I'll meet with all of you.
That's awesome. Sandy, you ready? I'm gonna throw this question at you. Is there any crosswalk with an education a crosswalk, let me try to say this in a way that you understand, a crosswalk available for CTE program? I believe they're asking, is there a crosswalk with our standards and functional areas with maybe the CTE program, their guidelines? Either one of you, Sandy, if I put you on the spot.
No, thank you, Michelle.
Yeah.
We don't have one specifically for CTE, but I'm probably going to throw that back to Bisa in regard to how to guide them in that regard.
Yes, thank you, Sandy. So that varies by state, because the different standards curriculum varies by state. The link I put in the chat for what Georgia's doing, I highly recommend you take a look at that, because it can provide, I really feel like that will put you where you need to be. You will see in there on that website too, that the CDA is already one of the career pathway completion options. So in your state, in your school district, look at what your pathway completion means. In some states, it means they completed 2 full years of ECE. Some means it's 3 years of ECE. Whatever your third year is, though, they should be earning an industry-based credential like the CDA. And so you would want to make sure that the CDA is listed as a pathway completion option. I know a lot of people take the NOCTI, NOCTI. That is a national exam. And that's one of the ways, if they pass the NOCTI, they're considered to have completed the pathway. But again, another option is the CDA. So I highly recommend, I had my students to do both the NOCTI and the CDA. So they were, so it's up to you. Yes.
All right. Thank you, ladies.
Awesome.
Okay, so Dr. Bisa,
Yes.
here's a question. I have an employee currently going through the CDA process. They took some courses in high school. Can those be counted towards the 120 clock hours?
So Sandy and I just had this conversation. We're talking with the credentialing team about it. So the high school CDA, they need to have applied, and this is our understanding, they need to have applied for the CDA while they're in high school. We know some of them may graduate, and it may be the summertime before they have their visit and take their exam. But our understanding is they need to have applied while they're in high school, because that's the high school program. Now, once they have graduated and they're out and it's been a year or two, they may need to take training from a community program. But again, I recommend they, that's our understanding, right, Sandy? You want to?
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, they have to definitely apply. They can finish up some things after they graduate, but they have to have applied during high school.
Thank you, ladies. Another question, and this is an important question. If a student is currently on an IEP, is the council able to make accommodations?
Oh, yes, we're equitable. Yes, yes. Sandy, do you want to?
No, definitely special accommodations. We have an esteemed colleague who deals with that all the time. And her name is Vilma Williams. But if you all, whoever asked that question, feel free. My email is actually at the end of this, as is Dr. Biza's. And if you want to just shoot me an email as well, I can connect you to make it even easier.
Yeah, and I love how the council focuses on equity, because in their CDA application, they actually have, there's a box they can check regarding whether they need special accommodations. Yeah, I actually had a student who needed special accommodations. And they provided that for the exam. Sometimes it's that they need the exam read to them. Audio, it's a variety of reasons. So if they need special accommodations, check that box and someone will follow up with you for them to appropriately take their exam based on their needs. Yes.
All right, that was awesome. So here's another important question. Is the council CDA high school handbook available in Spanish yet?
I will answer that. It is coming, not yet, but it's in the midst. So keep an eye out for it from Council News. Probably more early in the new year, but it's definitely being worked on.
That's awesome news. And again, it speaks to what Dr. Biza and you, Sandy, mentioned about the council and our commitment to equity. So Dr. Biza, I'm going to need you to push the rewind button and put on your memory cap, because somebody asked, what was the 5th course design lesson?
Okay, the 5th one was the review / evaluation. Name it something fun though, but I often called it review. And this is where your project or whatever you're considering, whatever's a grade for you, I'll say, that's that final piece. So it's introduction is the first. You do an A lesson, B lesson, C lesson on what you need for them to learn. And then your final lesson, your lesson 5, is your review lesson. But again, you can call it something else, but it's your evaluative lesson.
Okay, now that's awesome. Now, Dr. Biza, somebody asked in the chat, the test you mentioned, the NOCTI. Does that NOCTI test also prepare you for the CDA assessment, or should they be doing something extra in addition to that?
The NOCTI is totally separate. It's a totally separate company. It's totally separate. It has no connection with the CDA.
Okay, thank
Yes.
you. Thank you. And then there's another question, Sandy, for you. Is the application the same, the actual application applying the same for high school students, the standard application?
Yes, it is. It is. And in there, it's important that you mention, there's a box in there that you'd click that you're part of a CTE program. And that's really important to note and to click.
Okay, great. And I'm going to, these questions. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
And a component that people ask about a lot for that same question is they have to verify that they're in high school and that they completed the program. So that might be a transcript. I believe there's a letter from the principal or counselor. So that's the only different thing I can think of in the high school program. Exactly.
Yeah. At the end, I mean, in the beginning, it's clicking that box. And at the end, yeah, to get a letter from your high school principal or whoever's sort of observing them, and to have that. But other than that, the program is really like almost identical. It's identical to our regular CDA.
Okay, so this one is specific to what you talked about today in building this program. Dr. Biza, do you have a sample syllabus and lesson plans like you talked about today that we can look at, that we can use to follow as a lead or example?
Sandy, did we put that in the handbook? I know we went back and forth on what all we want to put in the handbook because we were worried about being too scripted and people following it,
Right.
to a T. So that probably is not in there.
May I give a plug and answer a question? It is not in there, but we have a national partner that has some wonderful curriculum resources that are designed specifically for CDA that have been funded by the Bezos Foundation that will give you some ideas. And that is Early Edu Alliance. Now I can't give you the website right now because I'm answering question and answer. So y'all need to Google Early Edu Alliance and somebody put that in the chat, okay? And then although they may not be exactly scripted, you do know that ECLKC, the Office of Head Start's Early Learning Knowledge and Resource Center, will have some examples under the Teaching and Learning National Center. Can't give you that exact website right now, but I need you to Google ECLKC. Somebody put that in the chat. ECLKC, Google, and Early Edu Alliance. You're gonna thank me later, y'all.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I will say, Michelle,
Yeah.
I had to think, it's been a minute since we did the handbook. There is a part where I put a model, some modules in there trying to help you organize your program and when to teach, when to do what. So yes, I would look in the implementation chapter in the CDA handbook.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, so Sandy, I know you keep me on you're a taskmaster. How many more questions can I do? Couple more?
I definitely, because I saw a lot in there.
Yes,
Yeah.
I know, and I'm doing my best. I'm feeling like the nutty professor, but in a good way. I love that our community is so cerebral. So let me keep going. Somebody, this is a very quick one. Somebody thought they heard that we had a birth through 5 credential and it wasn't separate infant, toddler, preschool. That's not true. It's still separate, right? There's an infant, toddler credential and a preschool credential. And if you have questions for us about how you can obtain both, we're happy to answer those for you afterwards. You can reach out to us via email. You guys okay with that question? And somebody has a question that's important. So I built my curriculum. Love what you shared, but how can I help my students, these high school students, get these 480 hours of experience?
Are we discussing that more next? So I highly recommend, this is my #1 go-to answer for that. You need an advisory committee. You need an advisory committee, and on your advisory committee should be local, at least 1 or 2 local child care center directors or owners who can partner with you because they can help you get those hours in. I've seen where this is those who don't have a child care program on site. I love that I've seen these partnerships really grow where the school was busing the students to their child care center to get their hours, y'all. So I highly recommend you have an advisory committee. You can call it advisory board if you want, but they're not controlling anything. You meet a couple of times a year, and your goal is to allow them to help you guide them guide you in the program.
Okay, great. So for high school CDA students, should the CDA portfolio be digital or hard copy or both? What do you ladies recommend?
It can be either. They only need one. So, right now, and we're going to talk about this next webinar, but we use Google all the time. We use a Google folder, and they put there, and I'll go over that a lot. I'll go over that in detail in the next webinar, but I recommend using Google Drive or whatever I recommend doing it outside of, it needs to be something they can access when they're no longer in your school. Once they graduate, usually within 6 months or less, they no longer have access to anything in your school district. The email address, nothing. So they need to do it in something an account they can access outside of your school district. So when they have their visit, it can be accessed. So that's my quick answer to that question.
Great. Okay, so we're at 3:59. So I'm going to give one more question. What you have outlined, people have a question about timing. If a student works in high school program for the 480 hours and the PDS specialist option, okay, somebody's answering a question for somebody and just saying, thank you for highlighting the timing in regards to the 120 clock hours and the 480 hours. Let's end with this question. This is important. This is about money, 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 money. Is there scholarships available for high school students to help pay for their assessment costs.
So here's the thing, you guys, there's a thing called Perkins. Write it down, Perkins. There's Perkins money. And if you look in the handbook, it's all in there. It's all laid on the line. Your school systems, if they're implementing CTE, they're usually doing that with Perkins dollars. And Perkins dollars can be used to buy your books. They can be used for anything related to instruction. So I highly recommend you meet with your whoever is over CTE at your school first, but don't go to the district first, go to your school first and talk about Perkins funds and have that conversation. Again, there's a whole section on that, on funding it. And then finally, I'll say on the council's website, there's a Find Scholarships. There's a resources link. There's a Find Scholarships link there for you to find scholarships by state. So thank you, council.
Yeah, no, thank you, Dr. Visa. And before we jump to your ending, Michelle, I just wanted to mention to a few of you. I mentioned it in when I first started, but a lot of you asked again. We will have this webinar recording as well as the presentation available to all of you. It'll be sent later today, early tomorrow via Zoom, and you'll get a link in there to both. And then also look out probably later this week, next week, to further communications from our marketing and communications department to you all as well. And then lastly, both Visa and my emails are on the presentation. So for any further questions and so forth, feel free to email either of us. And now, Michelle, I'll throw it back to you.
Hey, thank you, Sandy. And you guys, if we didn't get to your question again, charge it to our head and not to our hearts. And you can reach out to Sandy, Dr. Visa on TA Tuesdays, or myself to help get those questions answered. And we want to thank you for what you do every single day, whether you work with children directly and their families, or you somehow impact children and families and their well-beings. We know that what you're doing in preparing CDA students to provide high quality experiences matters, and it matters well. And you're not only helping the field recover and survive, but you're helping it thrive. And I'm gonna use one of my favorite words. That's the bomb diggity. And if you don't know what that means awesomeness in its purest form. So let me hurry up and give you some quick reminders, right? Dr. Visa talked about the next webinar coming, so look for that, save the date for that. Also, there is a link that should be in the chat to past high school webinars in case you need to catch up or you want to watch on demand for the first time. If you don't see it there and you hang up too quick and say, oh, I don't see it, the council has a YouTube channel and you can find the webinars there. Another thing real quickly, y'all, we're going to be at NAUIC in a few weeks, November 16th through the 19th. You can catch us at booth 2220 outside the opening general session as well, in a pop-up on the first day, November 16th. And I have to show y'all something. Don't hang up yet. This is corny, but I want you all to see. Can y'all see my I Love the CDA t-shirt? Okay, they're on sale. They'll be on sale at the conference, but they're also on sale on our CDA on our website under the bookstore. So if you love CDA as much as we do, go ahead and cop you a t-shirt. They come in this white color and also black. And Sandy, I think that's everything. You can see Sandy's email here. And then the next one is to stay connected, right? Is that our next slide?
Yeah. The next webinar is going to be end of January. Actually.
End of January. Thank you, Sandy. So we appreciate your patience. We appreciate you staying. We love the engagement, y'all. Keep taking care of yourselves and keep taking care of your students and the children and family you serve. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye, y'all.